Good evening, everyone. I can't see the list of participants, so I'm going to assume ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for inviting me to come and join your AGM this evening. What I want to talk about as the sort of main substance, if you like, is about raising BCS's profile. But before I do that, I just want to cover a couple of other things. I mean, some things that Tony has asked me about and some other things that I thought it would be good to share with you as well. So I wanted to do a little bit on governance, if that's okay. You're probably thinking, oh no, on governance, and there's a good reason why I want to do that. I'll explain in a moment. I want to tell you a little bit about me, just really so you know where I'm coming from, no more than that. A little bit on the operations of BCS, but really only a little bit on that. And then something about BCS and raising its profile and the impact it has in the outside world. So I hope that's okay with you all. Let me just spend a moment on governance then, first of all. So the governance of the institute is it's run by the trustee board. You know, the trustee board is the official governing body, and it has, if you like, 4 working committees. Which is a handy acronym you can remember: ACOS, ACOS, and the 4 sort of working, they're called boards. They deal with, A is for academic matters, an academic board, and they're busy at the moment looking at working with universities on accreditation of courses, which is some universities have called into question and questioned the value of, and so the academic board at the moment is working to sort of understand that. I think what I've heard so far is it's all going to be fine at the end of the day, but there was a bit of a wobble, if I can put it that way. And I think that's an important part of what the society does. So I was pleased to hear that. So that's the A. The C you probably be familiar with is the community board. There's a great guy, Alistair Revel, who chairs that. And the community board is that part of the organisation that looks after the geographical groups, the branches, and also the special interest groups like your own. And that's your sort of conduit in. And I'm sure you're familiar with Alistair and his work. The A, the third board, is organisation and employers. And in essence, its job is to try and promote and help the staff promote BCS membership to organizations. I think it's about a 6, 15–16% of members of the society come through a membership or by organization. So a company will join and join on behalf of all its staff, and that's a growing route actually. And you can see the logic that organizations want to demonstrate how important professionalism is to the organization, and therefore it wants to actually offer its staff the opportunity to be members of the professional body. The last is the society board, and that's the one that is mostly concerned with the external profile of the society, and is really the one that cares about that the heart of the society's mission, which is to make IT good for society. So the society board also another. I mean, all of these boards have great chairs, and if any of you are interested in these areas, the reason I make the point is, if any of you are interested in any of those aspects, I'd encourage you to look at the boards, get to know the vice presidents who run these boards, and express an interest in possibly becoming part of them in due course. The other important body is the council. You might be familiar with the council, which sort of stands apart a little bit from the governance. It does have some very specific roles. For instance, it elects the officers, such as the president, the deputy president, and indeed the vice presidents. And it also has the job of reviewing the strategy once a year, with a strategy away day. And the nominations for council are open at the moment. And for those of you, and I would really encourage anybody who doesn't feel that they have governance experience but wants to get it, to look at nominating yourself for council. I think it's a great body to get involved with, and to start to really engage with the governance of an organisation. And I think it's particularly, I would say, for anybody in the early days in their career, maybe 10 years into it or something. I think it's that sort of thing is a great thing to have on your CV. My role is now president-elect. You get to be president for a year, and I take over on the 10th of March next year. I once had a submarine commander working for me, and his attitude was, "It's your watch, sir. What are your instructions?" And I think, as president, that's the way I regard my job. It'll be my watch for a year. I'm not taking the ship anywhere it's not already going. It's just my turn at the helm for a year. I very much regard it that way. And in fact, the president and the deputy president and the past president do work as a triumvirate, as a team of three, so you get that continuity. And I'm really, I've had a great year as deputy president, and I'm looking forward to taking over, as I say, my watch in March next year. So a little bit about my background. I was for 5-6 years, I was the Director General of Digital Europe, which was the organisation, is the organisation that represents industry, tech industry into European policy making. My members were 70 or so of the largest companies, global companies in tech, and also the national member associations of each of the European countries, and a little bit beyond actually as well, Ukraine, Switzerland, Norway. We had about 40 country members, which in turn had companies as members. So, our reach into the business community, the tech business community across Europe was very, very extensive and impressive. Before that, I ran the UK bit, what is now Tech UK. It was called Intellect in my day. I was the Director General there. And turning to my sort of knowledge of your area, which is slight, but nevertheless, of course, information security was a very important topic at the time. I was in Brussels. The industry was shepherding through the NIS directive. I was somewhat involved with that. In my UK days, and if you remember John Suffolk when he was the government CISO, I worked quite closely with John and encouraging industry engagement with government on often on joint government industry cybersecurity initiatives. I got to know ENISA very well. You'll be familiar with that, I'm sure, the European Agency for Cybersecurity. But when I look back, the thing I learned that taught me an awful lot about your world was when I was chair of the audit committee at the University of Warwick, and we suffered a cyber attack. It was really very eye-opening what we had to go through and what we learned, and dealing with GCHQ, incredibly helpful. So I learned a lot about the practicalities of it from that point of view. Anyway, so that's governance. That's a little bit about me, and she'll come to what I intend to do in my watch with the BCS in a moment. But first of all, Tony, you asked about sort of operations, I think, of the society during the COVID period. And I would say the executive team have done a really very good job. They've taken good advantage of furlough without damaging the operations. And so at the end of the financial year, they actually made a small surplus. So, my view of the finances of an organization like BCS is, as long as they're in good shape, we don't have to worry about it. It's a means to an end. I certainly, unless I have to, I don't really want to get involved in those sorts of operations. I think we have a really good executive team to do that, and the trustee board, which the president chairs, of course, provides good oversight in a proper governance way. But I do fully understand the distinction between governance and management, having been on both sides of that equation. So we made a small surplus, and I think the executive team we have at BCS at the moment. I mean, I just think I'm very fortunate to be president at a time when we have such a super, and I would say young, enthusiastic team. I think Paul and Rob, the finance director, but all of the executive team are really enthusiastic, and I'm very pleased to be working with them, and I think we should be very pleased to have them working for us. So let me move to this presentation that I intend to, the slides I intend to just go through with you. And it's really the meat of what I want to do on my watch. I think where I can add value to the society during my time is to work with the team to continue to build the society's public profile. And you might know, I mean, you can perhaps see on this first slide, it says a unified team formed in January 2020. Well, what happened at the beginning of this year was BCS hired a very good head of policy and PR with a sort of public relations background, James Woodward. And James has been pulling together the work on our, if you like, our public face, complementing very much the excellent policy work that Bill Mitchell does. But James has really been looking at this from the point of view of raising our profile, and certainly James and his team I intend to work very closely with. So hopefully this is going to work. If I move on to the next slide, I hope it is. As you can see, I mean, I won't read all obviously as the slides we go through, but I think the key things on this point is to try and become the go-to organization for commentary. We really want the BBC Today program, if that's not a bit too old-fashioned, to be calling us whenever there's an issue on the relationship between IT and society. We want to be out there on social media, of course, as well, but we really want to be the go-to organization when there's an issue. And we want, and in order to make that possible, you really do need to bring something new to the party. And James and the team have been very good at commissioning research, insights, whether that's through YouGov polls of the public or asking the membership for an opinion. When you've got that sort of data, people do want to listen. So I think at the heart of the strategy is original research and insight. The objective is to amplify the public voice, and I mean, I'll let you read through this slide for a moment. And then a question that I will come when we come to questions at the end. I'd really like your thoughts on membership engagement in thought leadership. I mean, it strikes me we have such an immense amount of knowledge, know-how, experience in our membership. But organizations like ours, it's very difficult to sort of tap into that, to create a cohesive view and tap into it quickly in the sort of timescales that the media wants. You can't spend 3 weeks working out what you want to say when the BBC call you and say, could you appear on the Today program in the morning? You've got to be ready to go. So how do you do that? How do you increase membership in the thought leadership? So James and the team and I had some hand in this. I've spent some time working on, what are the strategic themes we want to focus on in the year ahead. Now, what I would caution immediately is all of us is to say, well, we can have our themes, but you equally have to be ready to react. So when something happens and the media want to comment on it, you can't say, well, we don't want to talk about that, we want to talk about this. But what you can use this as is a framework to measure. So when you get a request, you can say, well, does it fit in with our strategic themes? And if it doesn't, if it's a long way off, it might be a reason to say, no, we don't want to comment on that because we don't have a well-formed opinion. We can't really contribute anything valuable. We try and stick to the knitting. So the three themes that have been alighted on at the moment, and I really would welcome your feedback on this, are these three. So, and these aren't the precise wordings of them in any means, but you get this just to give you the sense. So the first is that public expects IT professionals to be ethical, competent, and chartered. And we want to drive that point home, that it's not just us saying you need to be professional, because to some extent they say, well, you would say that, wouldn't you? But what we want is the public to expect that of us. And James has done some polling and has got that feedback, that the public expects us to be professionals, people working in our field, the practitioners, to be professionals. And that isn't just people working in IT departments. I mean, one of the things I'm aware of is that in the research community, take the medical research community, there are lots of people using IT to support their work who are doing it in, frankly, an amateurish way. I mean, look at spreadsheets for track and trace, for instance. So IT professionalism needs to reach into those areas where people are using digital technology and IT. So the first one is very much about professionalism, and it's trying to get a pull from the public rather than a push from us. The second one is about diversity. And you can look at the many benefits of diversity, increasing the pool of people available to just fairness, basically, you know, that people should get, as the Australians would say, a fair shake of the sauce bottle. So, you know, I think that the diversity is very important to us, and is a message that ought to land. And then the last one, the digital divide. You know, I think the figure is that 12 million people are digitally excluded in one form or another, according to a survey that we've seen, and that's dreadful. And you know, if whatever that means, 20% of the people in the country can't use modern technology at the same time as we're pushing for it to be used more and more, then you know that problem is just going to get worse and worse. So these are the three themes we're alighting on. As I said, then it doesn't mean to the exclusion of all else, but this is, you know, these are the threads that we want to use. And so the reason I like this sort of approach is that, you know, when the president gives speeches on things, you don't want it to be just what is in the president's mind at the time. And equally, you don't want presidents from one year flip-flopping from one issue to another. You want what the president's speeches to be the tip of the arrow. You want them to just be part of the armory of our communication. So, you know, I really like it. This gives me something to hang my hat on, if I can put it that way. So we've just got now a few slides that, you know, bring this home. You know, the A-level results thing, and James ran a public survey. You know, more than half of the adults questioned had no faith in algorithms. Well, that's you know, given that our profession is largely about promoting, amongst many other things, algorithms, to have no faith in them is a pretty damning thing. So, you know, what do we as a profession think about that, and how do we get more professionals and more professional competencies amongst the practitioners that might then turn that round? Some coverage we had about the diversity, and we were able to promote the results of a very important webinar that we had on the topic, and some great coverage on the BBC about the digital divide, you know, the haves and haves not. So, you know, we're not alighting on these themes having done nothing about them so far. I think these are the central themes. So at that point, Tony, Reza, I mean, I will stop. I'm happy to answer questions. I'd really like feedback on these topics and whether you think those topics are right. But I'm happy to try and answer questions, any questions that you might have that I'm able to answer. So with that, I'm handing back to you.
Well, thank you, John. Very, very good talk. I certainly learned a lot from that, which is probably not surprising with my experience, but gradually getting there. There are a few questions for you, John. If you go into the control panel, you'll be able to see the questions for you.
Yeah. So get my mouse to behave. Yeah. I just need to do that. That's okay. Go to questions. Okay. At the moment, I don't see any. Oh, maybe I don't see any questions in my control panel at the moment, Tony. I don't know if that's better.
Tony, do you want me to read it out for John?
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. That would be great. Yeah,
Yes, that'd be good, yeah.
Ask me one at a time, or two at a time, whatever you feel.
No problem. So there's a question from Daniel Cope. John, there are quite a large disconnect between branches, specialist group, and the boards, with very few roles for the boards themselves as committee members being advertised. How do you propose in your time as president to increase diversity and inclusion?
So are those two questions, or
it looks like two from me, but what I think Daniel wanted to get is about what is the possibility of generally what he's saying, the disconnect between branches, specialist group, and the boards, with very few roles for the boards themselves as committee members being advertised. And then I think there's a question, how do you propose in your time as a president to increase diversity and inclusion?
Yeah. Okay.
And then there is a follow-up on that, but I'm not gonna go on it yet.
Okay. Well, I do. I mean, first of all, I think that point about the connection between branches, specialist groups, and the rest of the governance structure, it's an important one. It really is, and I know that Alistair Revel, who runs the community board, has been working very hard to make more of the community. And what I will do is I will go back to him, because frankly I just don't know the answer to that. I will go back to him, and I mean, if there's a, well, I'll just pass on to him. There's a feeling that doesn't work as well as it might, and what ought we to do about it? So if I may, I will pass that question on, and I think yeah, diversity and inclusion. I wish I knew the answer to that. I think there's a question about diversity and inclusion in our profession as a whole. It's been a long-running problem. You know, how do you get a more inclusive set of practitioners? The number I've seen is that we are it's 2.5 times as bad. So what does that mean? It means we're only 40% as good as the best industries are having a diverse workforce. And I know that this is going to be a big focus for, well, as you saw, it's one of the 3 big themes. So I think what I'm going to do is, and I mean, if you give me feedback that you think these themes are good themes, then we will very much make that one of the themes of my presidency, is how to drive that. I wouldn't pretend to know the answers. I mean, I've seen lots of suggestions over the years about, look at what is it. I mean, particularly, I suppose the experience I've had is, how do you get more women in the profession? And you then work with employers to say, well, how do you create an environment that is more conducive to win? What is it you're doing about your environment? And I've known over the years, the Tech Partnership and their computer clubs for girls, and there've been lots of specific initiatives. And I do think that we have to, as a society, we have to look at which of those we think are the most effective and get behind those. And I know we have some very active council and trustee board members, very much on this topic. And the follow-up question was?
Yes, so that was generally going on that, where he said, we currently do not have any diversity from such as LGBTQ specialist group, which quite commonplace in many other organizations. Would you support the creation of such a group, which I would like to propose to enable linkage with other diversity group in and outside the BCS?
Without a doubt. I mean, I'd very much support that. I think we saw today the European Commission publishing its strategy, its new strategy for this, and I'd very much support it. And I'll take that back too, and ask under that diversity heading what specific plans we would have for that, and I'll definitely support it.
Yeah, and I think that's all what it comes to your presentation. As per questions, so I don't think so there is anything else, so unless any other attendees have any questions going forward.
Well, what I would appreciate is maybe to Tony or to any of the organizers, let me know what you think about these themes, because we want to pick themes that both have an impact externally but are, what we want to do is when, if it were me and I'm on Radio 4 and I'm on the Today program in the morning, I know not everybody listens to that anymore, but the equivalent of it. If we're asked a question, what do you think about this? And we give an answer to it. We want it to be on one of those three themes, and we want members to be nodding their heads at home and ideally saying to their kids, that's the BCS. I'm a member of the BCS. And to be proud of being members because we're on the right issues, saying the right things. That's the way I see it. So I'd really be very pleased to have your feedback on what you think if these are the right themes. And I suppose one final thing I would say is, although I've explained my limited knowledge of your specialist area, if in my time as president I can be of any use to you in this particular area, then please do let me know.
Yeah, can I maybe have a question by myself, not as a representative of the members or something, but do you plan anything like how to attract maybe BCS with some special certifications or some added value? Because what I'm sometimes finding, there are a lot of organizations like ISU Square, ISACA, and all the stuff that they actually do have a recognized certifications, and part of the activities and being member of the organization not only place you better in the market as an individual, but is there something that, for example, BCS will be planning to enhance or do something on the similar scope under your radar?
Do you mean particularly in the information security arena or generally?
Not necessarily. I mean generally, because it doesn't have to be InfoSec or cyber. I think because the BCS is all across the IT, do you plan to do any specific certification or accreditations?
Well, it does. The society does a huge amount. I mean, its chartered status is highly regarded, and we're trying to promote that chartered status. It has a qualification for engineers, at the working level. So it does have a number of these, and it does a huge amount of examination, accreditation, and this is the issue that the academic board is grappling with at the moment, is accreditation of university courses. So it does a huge amount of that. I would say it's almost its bread and butter.
Okay. Now, sorry if that was my not understanding of the whole scope of the BCS.
Not at all. No, not at all.
More about when I think about ISACA and about the branding itself, I immediately know, okay, there is CISM, there is CISA, and everybody in the world knows about that. If you're gonna put it on your CV, it's top branch, and nobody cares it's coming from ISACA or whoever. It's brand. So if something like that would be equivalent in BCS, I know that you do CIPT, I think,
exactly, CITP,
engineering. Yeah, but on the other side,
chartered IT professional, yeah. But getting those qualifications regarded in the outside world is very important. That's very good feedback, Susanna. Thank you very much. I mean, the fact that you recognise those others and the BCS CITP isn't so well recognised says it all, really.
Yeah, sorry.
But I think
thank you. No,
to add into that. Right. Yeah, one thing to add into that is the CCP program that BCS are one of the accreditors for on behalf of the NCSC.
Okay.
Which is often hidden in the background.
Yeah, many of these things are, aren't they? Yeah, thanks for that. Good. Well, Tony, if there's nothing else.
Thank you very much, John, for your presentation.
Yep. I hope that. I have to say, when I saw on the agenda that it was an address from the president, it filled me with a bit of dread. I hope that wasn't an address, but rather a good presentation and discussion. So thank you very much for inviting me.
It certainly was. No, thank you very much for attending, John. Thank you very much.
Right. Thanks.